Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Loadout, presented by the Daily Dot. That's capital T, capital D, capital D. Please remember every single bit of that I just said. I am, as I always am, your loyal host, Jared Wynn, bringing you one more night full of esports news, discussion, debate, diatribe, and innuendo. How exciting. I am joined today by my co-host, the one, the only reporter, Jacob, hungry like the wolf, and our guest today, the one, the only Mike Roschenwimmer, a co-owner of Imagine, a Challenger Series team here in North America. Mike, thanks for joining us. How are you tonight?
I'm pretty good. How about you, Jared?
I am fantastic with you here. With Jacob as well, I guess. Mostly with you here, though, Mike.
Oh, okay. I see how it is.
Jacob is somewhat ancillary to my enjoyment of the evening. But with you here, Mike, I am fantastic. And I appreciate the bottles in the background. Actually, it gives it kind of a
I know, right?
colorful flourish, with the headphones. It really sparks, I like it. I like it a lot. Mike, not everyone knows who you are or how you became a co-owner of Imagine. Why don't you start there? Tell us how you got into the scene, how you got involved with Imagine, how you got involved in being, again, a co-owner of a Challenger Series team in North America.
Okay, so I got involved in the scene and decided to become, or put myself in there basically over the process of like a year and a half. I was talking about ideas with friends, namely, his name is Saad Awan and then Gerard Kelly. Both of them are working with us at Team Imagine. Gerard Kelly is one of the other co-owners, and originally Saad Awan was one of the co-owners as well. But anyways, we were just shooting ideas back and forth, and this was all while we were playing League, and I was just very passionate about the scene for League of Legends. And I wanted to be in there. I couldn't be one of the pros anymore because I'm too old, too slow now. I don't have the twitch like the pro players do.
Aren't we all?
I know, right?
I feel that.
So anyways, we decided to pull the trigger like at the end of March, beginning of April, and started formulating and planning how we were going to do it. And we started networking, and we started off with an amateur team to see how it would work out, and eventually through networking we got put in contact with a couple of teams in order to try to make a push.
That was good. So your main motivation, would you say, was just to get involved in the scene and be more involved with it without being able to play in the professional scene?
Yeah, I'd say the main motivation is just kind of like a dream. I have a really big passion for the esports scene, and I've been following games, playing games since I was 3 years old. And like I said, I can't be one of the pro players. I'm not good enough. But passion would be the biggest driving factor. It's not profit or anything like that.
Was it always League you had in mind, or just esports in general you wanted to be involved in?
I knew in some form or fashion that I wanted to be involved in esports one way or another. Just the fact that I'm so passionate about League itself and being in that scene right now was the driving factor for this current time and frame.
I imagine the goal is specifically to become an LCS.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
That's always the goal. That's the dream. Get everyone on the big stage, watch the players get up there, be able to say, hey, that's my team up there.
All right, well, it could be more than a dream, I guess. You're now in the playoffs, so you're getting there. You have it in sight. Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
We're very excited about it.
How would that change things for you, do you think, if Imagine became an LCS team? Like, how would your day-to-day change? How would your overall approach to the job have to change if you were an LCS team, one of the 10 in North America?
The overall duties would probably increase, as you might imagine. A lot more time would have to be devoted to it. It would also make some of the ownership, start having to decide whether or not they're going to take some time off from their job to focus and make sure that Team Imagine is going to be successful if they make it into the LCS like that. Basically, what I'm trying to say is we're not going to do anything half-assed. We're going to put all of our effort forth. That being said, we understand we're kind of a dark horse, but we have high hopes for our team. They have the potential.
Right,
so something that happens in Challenger is oftentimes that LCS teams come down and swoop talent. Looking at your roster, you have several players that would be candidate for that, mainly ManCloud and Steelback and Moon. What is that like? How does that fear, what is that fear? Are you fearful of that rather? And what do you do to have the players stay loyal to you? Yeah. So
it's definitely something to always think about. It's something we always consider. That's another big reason why it's definitely a smart move to have subs, especially for positions that might be up for grabs like that. And I'm sure that both of you know that there's no rules against poaching NACS teams, only for LCS. So that's an issue too. So basically it boils down to, player loyalty, making sure that they're getting fair compensation for their actual ability and skill and their dedication to the actual team. With those combined, typically it doesn't make me personally too afraid of it. That's just my take on it.
We had a challenger or two challenger owners recently speak out about that. Chris Badali, in an interview with us, talked out about like how he wanted protection because he was very afraid of people coming down, and because he has like Alex Hitch and Crumbs on his team, both who are former LCS players themselves. And then recently, in an open letter to Riot, Ocelot of Gamers 2 talked about SK trying to poach his roster.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I understand that that's definitely something that is, I guess, would say to be fearful of, and that you definitely want to protect against.
So, if I could say one more thing on it, like I understand why Riot currently doesn't have it in place. Like they want to see the LCS as competitive as possible. That being said, it would be nice to see it for the NACS, the protection as well. And one other thing I'm going to do is I'd like to do a shout out for Gerard. As far as the Chris Badawi thing and the player protection and the organization protection, there's actually a clause that Gerard came up with, which basically states that if a player is approached, then it's the player's obligation to let the management and ownership know, hey, we were approached by an LCS organization, they offered this.
That's good.
And also, that also falls on us. So if we're approached by another LCS team, we are obligated legally to tell the players what was offered to them and that they want to be in contact with them.
So do you keep an active conversation with the players about that kind of thing happening and the possibility of it?
So that's where the loyalty part comes in, and that's what I was talking about. The players feel open enough where they're able to tell our staff, and they're able to relay that through the chain, if you will.
Okay.
So far, we haven't had an issue with that.
If you do qualify, I wanted to ask you about this. Many teams who qualify for the LCS, of course, give in to the temptation to go out and buy new talent and basically create a new team to take up that LCS spot. Is that something you feel tempted to do? Do you think you need to do that? Or are you satisfied with the current team as it exists, if it qualifies? Where do you fall in that?
So the way I feel about it, and I'm a person, I'm very empathetic, and I like the players that we have on our team. That being said, it's also a business and it's also a job. So basically, we expect our players to perform at a very high level, and as long as they continue to do so, they have nothing to worry about.
Right.
It's when attitudes start to crumble, when performance goes down, and that there's no actual improvement on their end, no motivation, no dedication, that's when we have to start looking at other options.
Without speaking specifically to your team, I guess I'll ask you more broadly, do you think it's a good idea to have a team that comes together and manages to qualify for the LCS, however they do, and then you break them apart in order to bring in bigger name players? Is that a good general practice? Is that effective for the team in general?
If I had to tell the truth, honestly, it's kind of like a crapshoot. Obviously, it's not good for PR purposes, right? You have the players who make the LCS and they win it on their own, with the staff behind them, but it's like a dick move to do that to them. But essentially, like I said, it's like a crapshoot. So you don't know if really high talented players, if you put them on massive contracts, are going to be able to do better than a team that's already been meshing so far, in the NACS so far.
You call it a dick move, and it is. 1 second, Mr. Wolf, Jacob. You call it a dick move, it is, but as you mentioned before, the business is a big factor in there.
Yes.
I guess the question then is, where do you draw the line between wanting to keep up a good public face and wanting to be loyal to your players and wanting to be a successful organization? Where's that line drawn for you?
I'll just go back to what I said originally, which was as long as the players are playing it at an extremely high level, performing, have the right attitude, and are willing to, increase their ability and their skill, work with the staff, there shouldn't be an issue. So going forward with that, I'd say that's where the line is drawn. If you have players doing that, you don't remove them. If you have players not meeting that, then that's when you start considering options.
Sure, right.
So what happened when you recently replaced, or a couple of weeks back, you replaced all 5 members of the roster in terms of starting? You brought in 2 Frank Fan Gaming members as well as Frank the manager in 2 Odyssey members, Chunky and Steelback, and then your own mid laner from your B team, Maelstrom. So what was the catalyst to do that?
So a big part of the catalyst, I'm assuming you guys watched the Renegades games, right?
Yes.
Okay, and the Coast games?
Yes.
Okay.
I've seen a few.
So anyways, like when we actually had our original roster face one of the toughest teams, it kind of seemed like the original roster gave up before the match began. I'm not saying that all the players did that. I'm just saying in general that's what the team mentality seemed to be. We also spoke with the players and told them that we truly want them to continue to develop and work on their progress. And that being said, we haven't actually let anybody go um, that was outside of their own volition, if that makes sense. And just so that it's public record, Wolf is still on the active roster. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. It's like a six-man team.
Oh, okay. Okay, that makes sense.
You
I was not
mentioned Steelback, actually. I was curious about him because he's a big name, of course. He was part of Fnatic, only won the LCS, and went to MSI, 5 games with SKT. So he's got great pedigree, but he was also singled out a bit as a player who wasn't quite to the level of the rest of the team. They go in a different direction, bringing Reckless, and now, of course, they're 18-0 and going to Worlds, it would seem, for a potential run there. What was the thought process, and how did I guess I should start by saying, how did it come about to bring Steelback? How did it come about to bring Steelback onto the team?
So it's no secret. Obviously, we have two Odyssey, contracted players that are on our team. It's Chunky Fresh and Steelback, right? So that came about through networking and just the ability to lease Steelback and Chunky Fresh to Imagine like that. And since we have a good relationship with Odyssey, we were able to do that. And that being said, if you saw some of the games with Steelback, I don't know. I think it's up for debate whether or not he's the top NA ADC or even the European ADC. A lot of people talked about how, Reckles is maybe better, but I'm not so sure that that's actually true.
He was dumpstering people, and yeah, he was putting up like 10 kills almost every game, and yeah, it's ridiculous.
So what are your impressions of him as he comes in, of Steelback?
I think Steelback's a great guy. Honestly, I'm glad to have him on the team. Glad that he's one of our players. Even if we're just leasing him. Anyways, he's a positive influence for all the guys. He has a lot of knowledge coming from Fnatic like that, and he has a great attitude working with our team. He's definitely there and dedicated and passionate, trying to basically impart his knowledge that he learned in the European LCS onto our NACS team. And I don't know if you saw the spotlight for Team Imagine, the Challenger spotlight.
I did.
So even in there, Steelback talked about how he's trying to mentor some of the non-veteran players on our team, and even the veterans, as far as some of the top-level European play.
As far as personnel decisions go, we're talking about roster changes, talking about Steelback. As a co-owner, I'm sure you have a lot of sway in terms of who comes onto the team and who goes. What's the decision-making tree like for Imagine? Like, who makes the calls? Who brings up these potential offers? Who has the final say? How does it all go for you? How do you handle that?
So if there was a way to put the roles, like I'm kind of like the vision or the president behind things. I still have, say and power. However, the person who makes a lot of the decisions is Gerard Kelly, and he is like the COO, if you will, the CEO. He makes the decisions as far as contracts, what players we're looking at, who we're bringing onto the team, who we're putting on subs, that kind of thing.
Okay, so it's a decision that one person has the final stamp on, you would say?
I have basically what's veto power, right?
Okay.
But I'm not going to use the veto power unless I strongly disagree with something that is going to be happening.
I understand that. And as far as getting into talks with players, is that something that comes from anybody? Is it kind of a communal thing to start the discussions, or is it, some people are designated as you're going to have, you're going to be the person who brings up roster changes if they need to be brought up?
Right. So talks with players as far as acquisition or our own players, or what do you mean specifically?
As far as looking in new directions for players.
Okay. Like, for example, with the current roster that we have in place right now, ManCloud and Baby and Moon, like one of the things that we did, and we do this for everyone, we're not just in the league scene, we're trying to break into Dota 2, Rocket League, etc.
Right.
One of the things that we like to do is we like to have all of the ownership and the management and the original first couple of calls that we have with the potential players that we're going to pick up. And that way we can give them kind of an experience and a fuzzy feel-good feeling, if you will, of who their potential ownership is going to be if they sign on.
Sure. You mentioned Rocket League, actually, on a brief tangent here. What is your approach as far as getting into new esports titles? Because that's always a very flimsy thing, is predicting what title is going to be new. But if you can get in there early, I think it's a great thing for a team and organization to do. So how do you go about deciding which games you might want to invest in at a early level before they can really pay off as an esport?
Right. So with Team Imagine, it's kind of like an open door policy that goes with players and staff. If someone has a really good suggestion, we're very open to listening and seeing what they have to say. And in this case, I'll name drop. It was Curry Shot, GG, Rohit. He told us about Rocket League and how it was taking off, and he strongly suggested that we try to pick up some of the top players. So that's what we're looking at. But like I said, we take suggestions and ideas from the staff and the players, and we don't just write them off just because they're not in the ownership.
Right.
So speaking of Rohit, he was the manager for Odyssey and coach for Odyssey. How did that acquirement happen?
So it was a very similar thing as far as acquiring Steelback and Chunky. Basically, through networking and through the established relationship, we were able to bring him on as well with Steelback and with Chunky. And obviously, since Curry Shot had already coached Chunky, it was a natural decision for us.
Okay, so what do you think he brings to the team compared to other coaches you guys have worked with in the past?
I just think he brings a lot of experience, and he's been, in the scene for quite some time, working with a highly talented, player base. That being said, he's also very good for keeping the player morale support up and at the pick ban phase. So yeah, basically we just think he's extremely skilled at what he does.
Was there a particular coaching style you were looking for, or did he just happen to have it?
So I'm not sure if you guys know this or not, but in North America, it's very hard to find good coaches, right?
I've heard that.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, we've looked at the European style of coaching, the Korean style of coaching, Chinese style of coaching. Curry was basically what we were looking for as far as a coach, and he was one of the best that we could find within North America in order to help make our team successful.
So in terms of other support staff, you have Anna and Frank. Do you guys have anybody else? And what, individually do they contribute since they both manage the team?
Right. So Frank is essentially a general manager, and he will be assisting with management when it comes to other, competitive games that we are going to end up picking up in the very near future here. Obviously, he has a lot of networking connections on that front as well, which is very helpful, and he's a great asset to our organization. Anna was the manager when we were first starting things out, but since she's so talented with her artistic ability, she is essentially taking over the social media side of things for us.
Okay.
That being said, we also have a couple more. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Pavel Mozilla Kablek.
Yep.
He's working for us as well remotely from Czechoslovakia.
Okay.
He's kind of like an individual coach, strategy and analysis, kind of telling us, what teams their tendencies are and how to prepare for them.
So he's kind of like an analyst?
I'd say he's more coach than analyst. He focuses more on the coaching individually, if you will.
Okay. What is your take on the by proxy coaching? Because we saw a big controversy, of course, when Link left CLG, and part of that was talking about Monte Cristo coaching CLG by proxy, how it was a weird thing to do over distance. You think it works out in this case?
Right, so I'm not specifically sure how it worked for CLG. I'm not sure if they had an actual in-home coach, but since we actually have Curry Shot in-home, I don't think it's as big of an issue because we have a presence there. You know what I'm saying? And right. Since Curry's the head coach and Pavel's assisting, I don't think that it's a problem for us. And lastly, for staff, I just want to mention Alec Baby Zeus. I don't know if you guys know who he is.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so Baby Zeus is our main analyst right now. Okay. And we also have Ed, who is an analyst. I'll send you guys a link after this if you want to know. And finally, Asad Awan is kind of like the home manager, making sure that any issues that arise, whatever happens with the players, and logistics gets done, essentially.
Let's talk about the actual team and the performance you've had. Were you confident that you were going to qualify for the playoffs to begin with?
I was very confident in our roster. The only concern that I had originally, of course, with the roster swap is our team going to have enough time to mesh and build chemistry and be a cohesive unit in order to make it like that? As you mentioned, they made the playoffs, so obviously they were able to do that in a very short time, which speaks to their level of skill, their experience, having veterans like ManCloud and Steelback on the team. Chunky being in NACS scene as well before. I was concerned about it at first, but obviously I'm super stoked that they made it.
Yeah, they did. You went pretty well, of course. So you're pretty happy with the performance the team had. Did you expect that chemistry was more of an issue? Have you been surprised perhaps by how quickly they come together and be able to put together wins?
It's one of those things where you can't really gauge at first as far as the chemistry. It's very player dependent and how people mesh with their personalities. You can't really say, hey, these guys are all nice and they get along with people that are very personable before you actually put them in a team setting. So it could have gone either way. Thankfully, in this case, it worked out, and all the players. There's no fighting, there's no personality clashes or anything like that. So they're able to get along and actually be a cohesive unit and listen to the shot calling.
They made the playoffs. Time to go. Time to try to qualify for the LCS. You have Renegades in the first week. That's your first best of match. How are you feeling about that? What do you think about the matchup with Renegades?
So the matchup with Renegades, obviously it's a little bit daunting. They've been together for a lot longer, the players actually. I think it's been, like 6 to 8 months now at least that they've been working together as a team. So they have the experience. They know each other's tendencies a lot more than our current roster does.
Sure.
So it's going to boil down to, who has the passion, who has the drive to come up with the win, and who doesn't go on tilt. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. So both mid laners, yours and theirs, have a very historic history or like a long history with LCS and being in the competitive scene. What do you think that matchup's going to be like, putting ManCloud versus Alexich?
So I'm sure they're both going to have something to prove against each other. I would expect the mid lane to be very bloody. Both trying to make plays on each other.
The best kind, really.
Yes, of course.
What better mid lane than a bloody mid lane, right?
Right.
Are you confident, and we're having you make a big statement here, are you confident in qualifying for the LCS?
What I can say is I'm very confident in our roster and our team right now. I'm confident that if we make first, second, or third, that we have a very good shot at making the LCS.
Okay, I guess I should then ask you, are you confident making first, second, or third?
Yes, I am very confident in making that. I don't expect us to make fourth.
Okay, I guess by extension, then one could construe you're confident in making the LCS. So, I'm just putting it out there. Zooming out a little bit here, speaking more broadly, obviously there were some issues for Renegades with Chris Badawi and that whole thing. I'm sure you're very familiar with that process.
Right.
Has that made you feel a little hesitant as an owner in the Challenger Series to get involved publicly in anything, really? Have you felt kind of reticent because of that whole thing going down?
It doesn't really bother me, and I'm not afraid of that kind of stuff. It's unfortunate what happened to Chris Badawi. I don't necessarily agree with the punishment that was doled out. We've also spoken to Chris before, and we don't think that he's, the character that he's made out to be. That being said, even if that kind of PR fell upon me, I wouldn't care that much. I would know, deep in my heart, that what I'm trying to do here in the scene is something that's, at least the way I see it, good for the actual esports competitive scene. Not something that's going to bring a negative drawback to it.
Are you aware, though, of the possibility that you could, one day have a bad tweet or something like that, and suddenly you're in the crosshair of the, well, I don't want to say the name, the R word?
Yeah, I'm definitely aware of that. But that's something that you take on and you accept that risk when you make yourself into a public image, for example, onto the scene like this. Like I said, I'm not afraid of it. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, then, oh well, good for that.
So assuming Team Coast makes first, which I think is what most people assume at this point because they are very good with their roster, who would you rather face, Enemy or Team 8? Yeah.
So I might get a little bit of hate for this, especially if there's, fans or viewers listening. But honestly, I'm confident that our team could take on either one and have a legit chance at bringing them down. And that being said, I was also somewhat happy to see Cloud9, stay in the LCS because I do think they would have been more formidable than Enemy or T8.
I agree.
Jacob?
Yeah, I think that Cloud9 is the one roster, and especially since they have plans for the Gauntlet, as far as I hear, they seem like the one roster that could just 3-0 and put someone down, no matter who it is, whether it be Renegades, Imagine, or Cloud9 Tempest. So
right.
I think that Enemy and T8 are a little bit more bearable. So.
Well, speaking of you, Mike, has got me so pumped up for Imagine that I'm almost crying here. Not that I have something in my eye. No, it's that I'm very emotional. And,
of course.
In Imagine's performance, yeah. Jacob, why don't you ask Mike one more question to finish this off here while I contend with this malady that I have.
So, in terms of Challenger scene performance, and I think this is a really hot topic, a lot of people for the past at least 2 seasons, almost 3, since they kind of changed up the format, you've had bottom teams that are always like, you have your top 4 who are like, okay, maybe they can take a game off each other. They're
Right.
competitive, and then you always have 2 teams. Last season, you actually had one that you acquired, which would be Team Solo Mid Darkness,
Right.
Raider Iwa Mingle. You had them and CLG Black that were bottom riding, and then everyone else that was like at least competitive. And then this season you have Vortex and Winter Fox, and then you have Cloud9 Tempest, you all of Renegades and Coast that are competitive at the top. What do you think like makes that separation? And like, what do you think that those kind of teams could do to fix that separation? Because obviously they're not nearly as competitive as the rest of you.
Right. So I think one of the things that inherently has that separation, like I don't know if you guys remember or saw it, but basically I think it was Vortex. Yeah, they were the first ones that we faced. They didn't have 2 of their original members on the roster, right?
Yes.
So when we ended up facing them, they were a much weaker team because they had to use subs essentially.
Right, because they had to meet 3/5.
Right. So that inherently made them weaker at the very beginning, and obviously it sucks to start off on a bad note when you're trying to be a competitive team like that. If you're going to get 2-0'd in the beginning, the morale is going to sink considerably, even if you're bringing 2 other people on the team. That being said, it's recoverable. But as far as everything else, I think a lot of it probably has to do with the support staff and the support structure behind the players in the team. Making sure that they have what they need to be successful. They're provided for with the gamer house, the proper analyst staff, the coach staff, whatever it takes to put them on that level to be as competitive as possible.
So one last question. I just wanted to kind of tangent off of that. Vortex specifically, you guys are a team that has a very large roster and arsenal in terms of substitutes and people that you can move in, but so are they. And they have, I think, like 10 players that live or in close proximity and can easily play for them. What do you think about larger rosters in Challenger Series? It's becoming a little bit more in LCS, but obviously I think you and Vortex and Coast are the first ones to kind of do it in Challenger.
You just mean keeping the subs on the full roster too, or what?
Right, yeah.
Honestly, I just think it's a smart move. I'm not sure how each organization handles it, but essentially, life happens. There's a player who could have an emergency who's on the active roster, or, for example, a sub could eventually become better than someone on the active roster, or someone on the active roster doesn't have the right attitude and, is just kind of giving up. Honestly, I just think it's a smart business move and a team move, because honestly, it comes down to making sure that the team has the support there to keep them successful. Like, even if they had someone off the roster who had a family member die and they couldn't be there, having a sub in there and in their place to be able to play increases your chances much more than not having one there and then all of a sudden you're screwed.
All right, Mike, thanks a lot for joining us. We appreciate the talk. Imagine, of course, playing Renegades in the Challenger Series playoffs to push forward next week into the LCS. I personally am very confident after talking to you that Imagine is going to go all the way, and perhaps next split they'll be in the LCS playoffs. Could you imagine?
I definitely could imagine.
Yeah.
Yep, I like that.
Yeah. Just for you, I did that. Yeah, no problem. Free of charge. Thanks again, Mike. If you like the talk that we just had with Mike, be sure to follow the channel. Richard Lewis back on Monday talking to us about all things esports, as he tends to do. Of course, the VOD of the interview will be uploaded on our YouTube page, daily.esports. Check us out there. Facebook and Twitter, .esports.
We'll also have Leonix from Renegades, I believe, because there are Challenger people in chat. So,
yes, more Challenger interviews right here on Daily Dot on Twitch. Thanks for watching. Thanks again to Mike for showing up.
Thanks, guys. See ya.